They laughed when she married a simple mountain man, but he was the heir to a hidden fortune. The morning hung in stillness, cold, breathless, almost suspended in frost. Pines stood tall and unmoving, like silent sentinels watching over the forgotten hills. A single crow flew past the snow-blanketed ridge, its wings slicing through the silence like a memory no one dared speak aloud. Below the ridge, tucked away in a clearing few dared to find, stood a crooked cabin. Its roof sagged on one side. Smoke coiled from the chimney, lazy and thin. Not much, but enough to say someone lived there. He did. Jonah Hale, a tall, broad-shouldered man with hands like carved oak and eyes like winter mist. They called him slow, silent, mountain-mad in the town below. A man of few words. A man who didn't come down for supplies unless the snow cracked under his own weight. But he had firewood, a mule, and the kind of stillness most people spent their lives trying to outrun. That morning, Jonah stepped out with a tin mug in his hand. The coffee inside had gone lukewarm. He didn't mind. He stood on the edge of the porch, looking toward the tree line, then the road, what used to be a road, a trail of frozen dirt. And there she was, in a red coat too thin for mountain air. Hair undone, shoes muddy, eyes swollen, not from sleep but from what came before. She didn't say a word, just looked at him like silence might be safer than speech. Jonah didn't ask who she was, didn't ask what had been done to her. He turned, opened the door, and left it open behind him. She hesitated, just a breath, then followed. One slow step at a time, like someone walking into a memory too painful to name. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and ash. A kettle hissed gently on the stove. Dust floated in the golden shafts of light that cut through cracked windows. The girl, no older than 25, stood just inside the door, arms wrapped tight around herself like she was holding something broken beneath her ribs. Jonah didn't ask her name. He poured a second cup of coffee and set it on the table, opposite his. She didn't move toward it. Instead, she stared at the wood-burning stove like it might swallow her whole. Jonah sat, slowly. His joints creaked louder than the chair. He watched her from beneath the brim of his old felt hat. She was shaking, but not from the cold. Some tremble came from deeper places, from memory, from harm. He knew that kind of silence. Years ago, in another war, another place, he'd found a boy in a ravaged town, just standing there barefoot, holding a broken radio like it could call his mother back. Jonah had offered food. The boy didn't speak for 3 days. Only on the 4th did he whisper, "They're all gone." He never forgot that. This girl hadn't spoken yet either. But her silence was loud, loud enough to echo through the cracks in his old hardened chest. He leaned back, staring at the flames. He didn't need this. Not again. People came broken and left worse. Townsfolk would talk. His name would get dragged again. Last time he helped someone, it nearly killed him. Jonah stood, walked to the door, paused. Wind howled across the valley, thin, sharp, like the cry of something unseen. He looked back. She was still there, hands clenched, eyes locked on nothing. But everything inside her seemed to scream. Jonah sighed, low, heavy. He walked past her, picked up a wool blanket from the chair and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched, but didn't move away. Then he nodded toward the table. Sit, drink, rest, 3 words. More than he'd said in weeks. He didn't know who she was, but she was staying. It was 2 days before she spoke, not in full sentences, just fragments. Words like cracked glass, his truck, yellow with rust, left me in the ravine. He said I was too loud. Too much. Jonah didn't press her. He never did. He just kept the fire going, left food where she could find it, and fixed the window she kept staring out of, as if expecting something terrible to crawl through it. On the 3rd morning, he went down to the old shed. The padlock had rusted over. He broke it open, dug through the storage bins, and found what he was looking for, a rifle wrapped in cloth, a memory wrapped in dust. When he returned, she was standing on the porch, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. She pointed toward the ridge. "There's a tire mark," she said. "Fresh!" Jonah's jaw tightened. He walked past her, scanned the tree line. A faint track, too wide for a mule, too shallow for logging men. He turned back. "Who is he?" he asked finally. She looked away, eyes rimmed with red. "My fiancé was." Jonah said nothing. "He owed men, big men. I was the collateral. I didn't know until they came to the motel." Her voice cracked. "He drove me up here, said he had a friend in the hills. Left me, said they'd sort things out. With or without me." Jonah's hands curled into fists, slow and quiet. She looked up at him. "They think I'm dead or hidden. But if they think I ran, they'll come," Jonah finished. She nodded. Something changed in him then. Not loudly, not visibly. Just a slow stiffening in his spine, like a man remembering who he used to be before the mountains turned him into stone. By nightfall, he'd barred the doors, sharpened the axe, cleaned the rifle, and checked the traps he'd long forgotten. The girl helped him. Silently, like she knew survival was the new language they shared. The next evening, a distant engine broke the quiet, low, crawling, getting closer. Jonah stood by the window, watching two headlights carve their way up the frozen trail. "They're early," she whispered. "No," Jonah said, voice steady. "They're right on time." The snow fell softly that night, not in storms, but in hushes. Jonah taught her how to hold the rifle, not for war, just for steadiness. "For truth, like this," he said, gently adjusting her grip. His hands were rough, but careful, like someone touching something holy after years of doubt. She didn't flinch this time. She met his eyes. They practiced in silence, aiming at rusted cans lined along a tree stump. She missed most of them, but never quit. Jonah didn't smile, but something behind his eyes softened, like frost thawing just enough to drip. Later inside, she chopped vegetables while he cleaned the rifle again. She moved like someone who used to cook for many, and stopped after betrayal, turned meals into silence. He noticed she always set out 2 spoons, then paused before adding a third, a habit. A memory Jonah didn't ask. He simply took 1 spoon and set it back in the drawer. The fire cracked. Outside, coyotes called to the dark, but inside, something quiet was growing. A thread, thin but real. After dinner she asked, "You ever been left behind?" He didn't answer at first, just stared at the fire. "Not exactly," he said finally. "I came back from the war, but no one waited. Mama died. Girl I loved married someone safe. My name didn't matter much after that." He didn't say more, but she understood. She unwrapped her arm, slowly. There, just above the wrist, was an old scar, jagged, pale, familiar. He looked at it, not with pity, but with recognition. "They said I was difficult to love," she said, almost smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Turns out they were just too easy to leave." Jonah nodded, not as comfort, but agreement. They sat in silence for a long time after that. The kind of silence that speaks more than words dare. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside she rested her head against the old chair. He stoked the fire, and in that small mountain cabin, where 2 broken people had nothing left to trade but trust, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but a reason to stay. The knock came just before dawn. Not a timid knock, a hard, measured one, like someone who knew the door wouldn't be opened, but wanted it to be. Jonah stood, already dressed, boots laced tight, rifle slung across his shoulder. She was behind him, holding her breath like it might betray her. The knock came again, then a voice, low, southern drawl, greased with threat. "We know she's in there, mountain man. Hand her over and no one gets hurt." Jonah didn't move. "3 of us," the voice called again. "1 of you." "Don't be stupid." He opened the door, just enough to be seen, not enough to invite them in. 3 men stood in the snow, 1 with a crowbar, 1 with a pistol. The speaker nigh wore a leather coat and a twisted grin. "She's not yours," Jonah said, voice like gravel. The man in leather laughed. "She was never anybody's, just a piece to bargain with. Ain't that right, darling?" Behind Jonah, she gripped the chair tight, her knuckles pale, her lips trembling. "I'm not going back," she said. Her first full sentence spoken loud, clear. Leathercoat stepped forward. "Then we'll take you both. Or just you, girl." He'll be too dead to mind. Jonah raised the rifle. The man with the pistol did too. Standoff, frozen, then... The twist, Leathercoat smirked. You think this is about her? You think we didn't check who you are, Jonah Hale? Jonah's brow furrowed. The man continued, Your daddy didn't just die in the war. He left a ranch, 800 acres, untouched, oil land, some say. You disappeared into the hills. But the land didn't. We found it. He leaned in. You're the hidden fortune, old man. Jonah didn't blink, but something behind his eyes went cold. This ain't about the girl, Leathercoat said. It's about you. She just brought us here faster. Jonah slowly stepped outside, closing the door behind him. No, he said. It's about what kind of man you think I am. He raised the rifle. Gunfire cracked the silence. One shot, then two more. When the smoke cleared, Jonah was on one knee, shoulder bleeding, but alive. Two men fled into the woods. One lay still in the snow. Jonah crawled back toward the cabin. The door flew open. She ran to him, falling beside him in the snow. I'm here, she whispered. I'm not leaving. He looked at her, chest rising with shallow breaths. I know, he said, and smiled for the first time. The snow around Jonah turned red. Not fast, but steady, like the mountain had waited years to bleed again. She tore strips from the inside of her coat, pressing them against his shoulder. Her hands trembled, but her face was steady now. Steady like him, Jonah grunted, tried to sit. She held him down with one palm on his chest. No, she whispered. Not yet. He obeyed. The wind had died. Only the sound of their breath, the crunch of retreating boots down the trail, and the slow groan of the pine trees remained. They waited like that for what felt like an hour. Then she helped him inside, one arm over her shoulder, his boots dragging lines across the frozen earth. Once in, she stoked the fire, boiled water, tore an old curtain to bandage his wound. He watched her move, not as someone saved, but as someone changed. Outside, the body of the man in the leather coat lay still. The snow kept falling, soft, uncaring, covering him, erasing him. No police, no law. The mountain would take him like it took the others before. That night, Jonah sat in the armchair, pain sharp but fading. She curled up on the floor near the fire, wrapped in the same blanket he once placed over her shoulders. No one spoke. There was nothing left to explain. She reached out, placed her hand over his boot. Not a plea, not fear, just a touch. Warm, alive, real. He looked down at her, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in the cabin. The next morning the snow had stopped. A new light broke through the trees, quiet and golden. She stood at the window, arms crossed gently over her chest. Jonah came to her side, slower now, bandaged and tired, but standing. He looked out with her, across the land that was his birthright. Land they came for, land he never wanted until now, still want to leave. He asked, voice low. She shook her head. I think I just arrived. Jonah nodded. Outside, the world looked the same, but inside everything had changed. Spring came late to the mountain. The last snows melted slow, turning to rivers that carved through stone and memory alike. Grass crept back over the trail. Birds returned, cautious but singing. Jonah never went back to town. Neither did she. But the cabin changed. A new window was added, facing east where light entered first. The porch was repaired. A second chair joined his. Some mornings they sat together without speaking, just sipping coffee as fog unraveled across the hills. She planted things, not just vegetables, flowers too. Daffodils along the steps. Lavender near the edge of the woods. Things that said, someone lives here now. Jonah didn't speak of the past. But he began to write, in a leather-bound book he kept beside the fire. 1 page a day, no more no less. Sometimes she read it. Sometimes she didn't. One afternoon, she returned from the ridge with a marker stone, smooth and round. Together they buried what was left of the man in the leather coat. Not out of honor, but closure. No words were spoken. No names written, only silence. And then, the future. They built a fence, raised hens, watched the stars like children who hadn't yet been broken. One night, as the fire cracked low, she turned to him. You ever think we'd end up here? She asked. Jonah thought a moment. No, but maybe the mountain did. She Smiled, tired, alive, years passed, the land remained. No, one came looking for the fortune. Again, and maybe that was the real secret. The wealth wasn't buried in soil, but in stillness. In choosing someone again and again, when the world had given up, at the cabin's edge. Two old chairs now sit, weathered but upright, facing the sunrise, and the final line etched not in stone, but in the life they made. They laughed when she chose a man with nothing, but she gave him everything, and found he'd been holding it all along.